Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us for this episode of Conversations with the Council. I am Jenny Bowersfeld with Lacey Public Affairs. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us for this episode of Conversations. And sorry, I was getting some feedback there. So I am excited to have with us today Deputy Mayor Cynthia Pratt.
Hi.
And Councilmember Carolyn Cox. And Erin Quinn Valcho as our guest today. She is our museum curator. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
So thank you all for your time today and joining us. We have a couple of really great topics to talk about today. We have Lacey History Month coming up that we are going to hear from our council members as well as Erin to get some more information about what we can expect coming up with some events and just some great things. She's also going to be sharing about a couple museum type projects. We have our depot building that she's going to be talking about, as well as our future museum sites. So we'll be hearing more from Erin in just a little bit. We're also going to be talking about the women's suffrage movement. So that is celebrating the 19th Amendment, and which gave women the right to vote. So we're going to be hearing, you'll notice that Deputy Mayor Pratt and Councilmember Cox are dressed in attire. They were out waving and to people passing by the Depot District building. So they thought that they would don their hats and dresses from yesterday to celebrate. So first I thought we would have Carolyn, if you wanted to start off just giving a little bit of information about the upcoming History Month, Lacey History Month, and what some people can expect.
Thank you, Jenny. Well, I'd add a little footnote to what you were saying about Cynthia and I in period costume. We were also joined by former Councilmember Linda Zeman, and yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the day Tennessee became the final state to ratify the 19th Amendment, which is why we were out there yesterday. And I'll leave the Deputy Mayor to talk a little bit more about the depot replica where we were in the Whistle Stop tour. But September is Lacey History Month, and despite the limitations of COVID, we have lots of exciting things planned. One that everybody, I think, looks forward to is learning who the Historian of the Year is going to be. And that will be announced at our August 27th City Council meeting. We'll also have a proclamation that evening to kick off Lacey History Month. Please note that meeting will start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it will be broadcast and live streamed. One note, I know everybody's looking forward to getting back into the museum, but it is still closed. But that doesn't mean that the staff isn't there. They're still there to help you with research, photo requests, and things of that nature. So please don't just think that we're shuttered completely. Since 2002, the Lacey Historical Commission has accepted nominations and selects a recipient of the Historian of the Year Award based on their contributions to the preservation and promotion of Lacey's history. Erin, could you talk to us a little bit about the up and coming then and now social media posts that you're doing?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So in celebration of Lacey History Month, we're going to do some really fun, nostalgic then and now posts that will feature pictures of Lacey, what it looked like in the past compared to how it looks now. People really seem to get into looking back and having some nostalgia. I got a couple examples if you guys want to see.
Yes, I would love to see.
All right, here's the first one. This is Richard's Roundhouse Restaurant. This was located in what is now the Fred Meyer's parking lot. This was a very happening place in the 1970s. And of course, it was very iconic with its train car sticking out the side. I think it's such a shame that this building was torn down. It would be so cool if it was still there.
Mhm.
And rumor has it that that train car was used during President Truman's 1948 whistle stop tour. Okay, I've got another one for you. This is a really cool photo. We're going to go back in time here a little bit to an early Lacey post office. We recently acquired this photo, which is very rare. We believe that this store, which also housed the Lacey post office, was located on Bowker Street, which used to extend past Pacific Avenue, which it doesn't now, but it puts it just about in the location of the new museum site, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So I just love that. Another favorite eating spot is Lee's Restaurant. People just light up when I talk about this place. This was a very popular restaurant located on Martin Way. There is now a Yamaha Motorsports store there now. Their claim to fame was that they were, if not the first one of the earliest Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises in Washington State. And you can see that Kentucky Fried Chicken right there underneath the Lee's Restaurant. So these are just a few examples of some of the fun tidbits that we'll have to share. And as a little teaser, I'm going to tell you that St. Martin's was once home to a professional sports team's training camp, and we're going to be posting pictures of that from the 1970s. So yeah, it's going to be cool.
Thank you, Erin. I find it interesting that the Lee's Diner, I mean, back then you could still operate under a different name, but carry, franchise food like Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah, well, it hadn't turned into like its own specific restaurant. It's cool, actually. Colonel Sanders himself would drive around from restaurant to restaurant looking for certain types of mom and pop restaurants that would be approachable for the type of food that he wanted to prepare. So he actually went into Lee's restaurant, cooked them the food, and convinced them to carry his chicken.
Wow. Oh, how interesting. That is very cool.
Yeah.
So usually we'll do some questions at the end, but I think it just might be easier as they come in pertaining to what we're talking about, just to address them.
Okay.
So there was a question that just came in that says, how do you request historical information? As Councilmember Cox mentioned, that the museum's closed. However, staff such as yourself is available to fulfill any requests that come in from the public. So how would people get a hold of you, Erin?
That's a great question. So people can go right on our website, laceymuseum.org, and on there is all of our contact information. Our phones forward to our mobile, and you can email me at my email address, which is on the website. That's the easiest way.
Perfect, thank you. Erin, do you want to touch on, so in the past we've had some, the lecture series, the history talks, and I know with COVID, those came to a stop for a while, but we're looking to bring those back virtually. So I thought it'd be good to shed some light on topics coming up, and if you have specific dates yet to share.
Great. Yeah, like everyone else, we have moved these programs virtually so that folks can enjoy them safely from home. And the first one will be on Monday, September 21st at 6 p.m. We're going to kick it off with a conversation with local historian Shanna Stevenson, and she'll be sharing a deep dive into the history of women's suffrage in Washington State and highlighting the really amazing local women who were activists in the movement here. And then in October, on Tuesday, October 20th, we're going to have Eric Ebel, the chair of the Lacey Historical Commission, give a talk on the Medicine Creek Treaty Tree. He's going to be talking about the Indian Wars of 1855 and 56 and how that history resonates today. Both programs start at 6, and Zoom registration links are up on our website now.
Oh, that's great.
If you just go to laceymuseum.org and click on events, you can register for them there.
Perfect. That's exciting. I'm glad that we're able to still offer that information up to people. I hope that we have a lot of people that take advantage of that, because that will be some great information, a lot of history shared. So that is exciting. Yeah, we have some really fun stuff coming up for History Month. So Cynthia or Carolyn, I wanted to just give you an opportunity if you had any final thoughts on History Month before we move on to the women's suffrage.
Well, I hadn't realized we were doing some of that virtually, so I'm glad to know. I'm going to try to link in to be able to do that. That'll be fun. I don't, but you know, there's so much that keeps you keep learning and finding out about that you never knew before. So I'm really pleased that we'll have those discussions.
Jenny, we also had a question. Someone was asking if the programs were free, and they definitely are free. They were free before, and they'll continue to be free.
Yes, perfect. And Erin, is there any estimated date to when the museum will open back up?
Well, at this point, we're definitely closed through September, but of course it will depend on the situation as it unfolds.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, and as we have women's suffrage movement coming up as a topic, and you may get to this later, but I know that when the museum reopens, you do have some great displays for that, correct?
That's correct. And yeah, I'll be touching on that a little bit, but yeah, that will be the exhibit we open with. Good.
Well, Deputy Mayor, I wanted to turn it over to you if you wanted to highlight a little bit about, well, maybe give a little background to, I know that Councilmember Cox, you mentioned earlier why the attire that you're wearing, but you both were present at an event yesterday. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell a little bit about your experience there and just intro us for the women's suffrage.
I would be glad to. This will be one of the things that people don't realize is that ratification was just based on you needed 2/3, no, I'm sorry, 3/4 vote of all the states, and the 36th state was Tennessee, and it was only because Harry Burns's mother wrote him a letter and said, you really need to ratify this. He wasn't going to, but because of her, he did, and that's how it got ratified. So what we talk about is the whistle stop, and people, women around the country lined up and joined the train or waved to it as it went by when they went to the convention. And so that's kind of what we were portraying. And there was 3 of us. There should have been 4. One person wasn't able to attend. And so there we are.
Here you are.
And yes, we were in mass. And our council, our city manager showed up just for that photo op. So, and there's the flag behind Linda Zeman, so, which is great. And it was fun. People honked, they waved. There were some that looked like, what's the 19th Amendment? And that was good too. That train depot area was just wonderful for doing this. We were shaded. It's amazingly a larger spot than I thought it was, since this was the first time I've been actually on the platform. And as we went, waved to the cars, which were supposed to be the train. Also, the trail, the people went by both running and on bicycles and walking and whatever. They stopped and talked to us and asked about that. And we have this wonderful story that Carolyn and I were talking about, is a man and woman were pulling a cart with their dog in it. And on the side of the cart, it said, register to vote. And so we've got a picture with them as well, with this very old dog, that sweet dog, to go with the whole story. And it was great.
That's perfect.
Yeah, but so what I want to make sure people know what's coming up is that while it got ratified, it gets certified. It had to be certified, actually signed into law, and that occurred August 26th. And the post office is going to commemorate a stamp for that occasion. And I want to clarify, this is not every woman got to vote, and Erin, I'm sure, can talk a little about this, but for the most part, most women did, at least white women. And I'll be at the post office for at least a few hours. The post office is selling, I believe, the stamps from 11 on, and I'll be there in costume for at least an hour and a half. Also, what's happening, because I'm a poet, on Facebook, I am sorry, my phone keeps going off. I am going to stop. If Erin may be wanting to explain briefly.
Well, I can go into talking about the depot if you'd like.
That would be great.
Okay. Well, it was so delightful to see the first event there at the depot as the background to this event. And since we are on the topic of the depot, and we've been getting a lot of questions about what's happening there, I thought I'd share what's up with everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show a drone photo that's recent of the site. There it is.
Very cool.
And you can see there in the upper right corner the depot. And this was a City of Lacey 50th anniversary landmark project. And you can see that circular area just below the depot in the photo. Go back.
Oops. There we go.
There we go. And that is slated to be a train-themed playground. And that is being installed next week, actually. We've had a lot of questions about why the fencing is still up if the depot is done, and that's why we're still installing the playground, which, as a side note, Lacey Rotary donated $50,000 to that project, so we're really grateful to them for their support.
Yeah.
It's really exciting because the depot will be the visual anchor for this new depot district. And it's an important feature of the entire museum campus. And in the meantime, before the museum gets done, the facility will be available for use by the public as a rental similar to other park shelters. Mm-hmm. Now I'd like to show you that site plan.
Hey, Erin.
Yeah.
If I may just ask you to elaborate a little bit on, this is essentially a historic building, and maybe a little bit of history of why there is a replica building of a depot going in, what used to be there, and what important events happened on that site.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for asking. So this site was the original site of the Lacey Train Depot, and what is now the Karen Fraser Woodland Trail was the actual train bed of the train. And the depot probably stood in about that location, but farther to the east, about on Clearbrook. Probably it stuck out a little bit on what is Clearbrook now. And so we couldn't locate it down there. So we put it where we did. But what was really important about the train coming to Lacey is that year, 1891, sort of changed everything from it being just this sort of loosely connected community of agricultural settlers in the area. It kind of made a cohesiveness. There was a new neighborhood across the street. There could be a store, a racetrack was built, a hotel was right there. a whole bunch of services came to the area and formed what was the heart of historic Lacey. And that's what makes this a really important site.
Yeah, and I wish I would have thought to prepare to have the photo of President Taft coming in on the train with everybody standing out on the front of the depot, because I think that would be a really cool photo to show too.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? It just left my brain.
That's right. If you wanted to, yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that info. If you want to, you can go ahead and go on with the next slide.
Yeah.
And showing.
Okay.
If we can.
So back to the site plan here. So the proposed museum and the depot will work together to create this great place for people to come and experience history and learn about our cultural heritage and enjoy fun events, music, that sort of thing. The depot itself will be used for a variety of things, and that could be music or shows, a place for kids who are on field trips to the museum to eat their lunch. It will be a site for educational programs and activities, and of course the rentals can continue to happen once the museum is open. Let's also take a quick look at before I go, I wanted to say that the train depot was reconstructed based on plans from the original train depot design. So with some adjustments for our modern use, it's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So here is one of the renderings of what the new museum is proposed to look like. We are currently just finished schematic design, which is about 30% of the design process. So the next phase will really dig into those details and hammer stuff out. So the end result may not be exactly the same, but the footprint should be about the same. This is a view from the parking lot, and it shows this really nice plaza leading up to the front door. And the posts on the left are a nod to the fact that our museum will be on the land that was originally tribal land for, in particular, the Nisqually and the Squaxin tribes. And there will be 9 poles out front representing the 9 Salish tribes. But we're working with the tribes on this to make sure it represents them the way they would like to be portrayed.
That's great.
In another view, here from the depot and the playground, you can see on the right side of the building, that's the exhibit side of the building, and then the left side of the building is the event side. And you can see along that wall that there's this wall of windows. Those will all open up. And so if you want to rent that space for an event or a wedding, you can actually open all of those windows and have a nice outdoor and indoor experience.
Oh, that is very cool. Erin, is that then, do you have access to the museum area, or is that going to be like its own separate space?
So it will be its own separate space with access. When the museum is closed, the museum can be completely shut off from it. But we can also offer an additional service, which is people could have the museum open for their event, but it would, obviously cost more.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah. So people always ask about the timeline of the project, and that will really depend on funding. We received a Heritage Capital grant through the state to complete the architecture and engineering, which is the phase we're in now. We'll be moving into design development in the next couple of weeks. And like I said, we'll work out all the details in there. And we did just apply for another state grant that will help us get the site ready for construction. We don't find out about that one until June, but all of the money that the city has spent on the project is being used as matching funds for grants so that we can really do the best job possible leveraging public funds.
Great.
So in the meantime, we'll be planning our capital campaign, and if everything goes perfectly, it could be open in the next 5 to 7 years.
So Erin, Also, the train depot has enough space that they could have small birthday parties and so forth inside, correct? And you can rent that out.
Yep, definitely.
Plus, the platform is big enough that once we open it up, it conceivably on the other side have music or whatever outside.
Yes, and we've preserved a spot in front of the depot that won't be parking lot, that will be grassy area.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. And just to make sure that I have the right information, since it does go right, the trail goes right along, that will be a facility that is open. People can stop and utilize that playground anytime. Anybody that's riding by on their bikes or that want to drive and just park there. There's bathroom facilities that will be open during the day. Is that correct?
Yeah, the bathroom facilities, once the site is open, will be open probably seasonally. That is similar to other parks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think thank you for sharing this information. I think it's just good to let our residents and community know. I think there's been a lot of question about what this building is. People see it being constructed and there hasn't been a lot of info going out yet. So I'm sure there will be more to come on opportunities that are available for this building. But I think the vision that the city has for this whole area as a whole is really exciting, and the end result is going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's going to be an amazing destination for people.
Absolutely. And I love the idea, like you mentioned, of a classroom, well, when classrooms reassemble in person, but classes coming for field trips. And like you said, that's a place that can be opened up for them to eat lunch at and play on the playground for a little bit after their tour. I just think that that's going to be a really great resource.
Yeah, I agree.
Cynthia or Carolyn, do you have any other questions or comments regarding?
I have a few more things I would like to say, and I apologize. I thought I muted my phone and I didn't. Get rid of those things. So one of the things I did want to mention that on Sunday, the 23rd of August, there's going to be a suffrage poetry reading, both of people's women's poems and older poems and together, and that is going to be at 11:30, and they need to go on Facebook if they have Facebook and sign up with Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. So CV Live Poetry, and then they'll be able to hear it because it'll be live streamed like this is being done. So and there's at least 4 of us that are local that'll be reading. Some will be across the nation.
Great. So does Cultivating Live Poetry, do they have their own Facebook page that people need to go to first and then they can find the information to sign up? Okay.
Yeah. Cultivating Voices Live Poetry.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think, as I said, I think during this whole time, there could be oddball things going on that I don't know about, including in Olympia and whatever. So people should just kind of look at their calendar and see what pops up. But yeah, so I think that's about all I needed to mention. I'm hoping that others, it's conceivable that next year, August 26th or something, we could do this again.
Great.
101.
Yeah.
One thing that kind of hit me between the eyes yesterday as we were out waving at motorists and celebrating the actual date of the 19th Amendment being ratified was the parallels between 1920 and 2020, where people were still in the throes of the Spanish flu pandemic at that point, and things, we had World War I going on, and I mean, it was really scary times. And here we are 100 years later in really scary times again. But one thing I I hope that people will see, it's a reason to study history, just gives you these insights and makes it very relevant to what's going on today. The other germ of this that occurred to me was that period was a time of great social change, and the unrest that was going on in our country then. And I think we're seeing today that a very similar thing is probably on its way to happening, depending on how the election goes one way or the other. But I think we're going to see big change whichever direction the country goes. So it's worth noting.
Yeah. Well, and just a, reminder, women, men, young, old, to vote. This is our responsibility and right as American citizens. So, register and get out and vote. So
it's important to me because my grandmother was 43 when she voted, and she never missed a vote after that. But can you imagine not being able to vote until you're 43 years old?
Wow. Yeah. We had a question just come in that's asking, Erin, can you talk about what types of exhibits or artifacts we might find at the new museum when that opens?
Sure. So the exhibits haven't all been designed yet, but we will have 2 galleries. One is a core gallery that will tell the history of our area here in Lacey and the general surrounding area. So we'll include tribal history in that, as well as African American history and women's history, and be as inclusive as we can be. But we're also going to talk about, the settlement period, and we'll get into incorporation and the fire department's role in that. And the artifacts, we have a lot of artifacts in our collection that aren't on display, but we'll also have a featured exhibit probably on St. Martin's and the early radio station that was there, and the resort era, because I got to have somewhere to put that rowboat. And so some things like that. And then our changing gallery will be a combination of things. I would like to see us do some exhibits from our own collections that will highlight different themes and maybe get more in depth into some things. We can bring in some outside exhibits from other places. And another thing I'd really like to do is ask the community to participate in community exhibits where they bring their stuff in and we tell people's story.
Have fun.
Yeah.
But Erin, I'm going to issue a challenge to you.
Yes, ma'am.
When you bring in the next exhibit, it's got to be as good as Sasquatch. That was an amazing exhibit. And I really commend you for doing that. I think it generated a lot of interest in the museum, and it was a lot of fun. So well done.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed doing it. It's hard to come by topics that pique such interest as Sasquatch did.
Yeah, that didn't just pique interest at the museum. That piqued interest. I mean, that just blew up. We had an exhibit here at City Hall that people would come in to see. I haven't asked what the current status is, but there's a video. Erin, do you know what that YouTube video?
I don't know. John would know.
A crazy amount of views. So yeah, if you could find something that would bring that much attention to Lacey again, that'd be great.
Yeah, challenge accepted. I'll work on that.
So somebody sent in kind of a question comment that says, wasn't Susan B. Anthony in the Lacey Olympia area to speak during the suffrage movement?
Yes, she was. And that is something that Shanna is going to be talking about in her presentation in September. She actually visited the Bigelow House. If you go visit the Bigelow House Museum when they're reopened, you can hear all about that there too.
Cool. So people need to tune in to,
that's right.
Yeah, that event. Well, good. I don't think we have any other questions at this point. Cynthia or Carolyn, do you have any final thoughts or anything to add before we wrap up?
I don't, but I would really love to have the shared postcards that I sent over. I don't know if that's possible to share them now.
Yes.
And maybe I can kind of talk a little bit about them. So these were postcards that sent around, and this one I love is "To ask freedom for women is not a crime. Suffrage prisoners should not be treated as criminals." And people forget that women had a hard time. Often they were thrown in jail or beaten up or whatever in some areas. And I just love this dress of the second one where she's standing there so sedately while people are surrounding her, and she's determined to stand there. So that's great. The flag behind that is a replica of the official flag that people took around. It's purple stars on a white background, and then the gold for the background. And people had that banner all along when they talked about demanding women's a right to vote. And let me see what else I could tell you. Those are the two main things. One of the other things, it's not a crime to expect to vote, because after all, we're 50% of the population. There was postcards that said something to that effect too.
That's great. Thank you, Cynthia. Where did you come across those postcards?
A friend who is very active in the suffrage movement sent them to me. And I had a couple others. They weren't quite as obvious as those. And, but I thought maybe those two are pretty relevant. I just wish I had official pictures of people I knew, like my grandmother. I did know her. She lived to almost 108. So I never asked her all those things, but I wish I had pictures of her having participated in some of the marches.
Sure.
Cynthia, could you, and maybe Erin could shed a little bit more on it. You mentioned the whistle stop tour to the convention, but you really didn't talk much about what convention and what that was all about. Could you flesh that out a little bit more for us?
I'll try. It's during that August 18th, women were riding the trains to advertise and bring attention to the ratification. And so they had various stops. Now, I don't think actually Lacey's train depot was on that, but I don't know that. But here we are. Why not put it saying that it is? And then the train went from the entire, I think the whole length of the country, and they were going into Olympia primarily, and then on. So a lot of women who couldn't participate, but participate in all of this, would stand and wave to people with their, and I didn't say we should bring little white handkerchiefs, but they would wave their handkerchiefs in support. And there are actual official whistle stops that have been designated throughout, and I don't have a list of them, but there are various sections of the country. Erin, can you add anything more to that?
Not that particular, but I did prepare some history of the suffrage movement in Washington State, if you'd like me to start on that.
I would like you to, because I think it's important that people know about Washington.
Yeah, so in honor of National Suffrage Month and in celebration of the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, I thought I'd share with you a bit of our local history related to that topic. So Washington was the 35th state to ratify the 19th Amendment, and that was on March 22nd. Only one more state was needed, but it would take until August to get another state to agree to the ratification. And as was previously mentioned, that was Tennessee. But Washington, we were way ahead of the game. We had actually passed an amendment to the Washington State Constitution 10 years earlier in 1910. And in fact, Washington has a really long history of activism for women's suffrage. Way back in 1854, at the very first session of the Washington Territorial Legislature, a proposal was made to allow women to vote. It failed, but surprisingly, it was by just one vote. That would be the first of very many attempts to try to pass similar laws. So let's fast forward a little bit to the session of 1867. Legislation was passed using the word citizen without the qualifying male in the voting laws. And a few years later, in 1870, two sisters, Charlotte Emily Olney French of Grand Mound and her sister Mary Olney Brown of Olympia. I think we got a picture there. Yeah. That's Charlotte. They decided that they were going to test this law. The women in Grand Mound, after a debate with the election judges, were allowed to cast their votes in a Washington territorial election, making this woman here, Charlotte Emily Olney French, the very first woman to vote in Washington, right here in Thurston County. Three other local ladies, her sister Mary, plus Jane Wiley and Jane Pattison, tried to do the same in Olympia, but they were not as persuasive and did not get to vote. And there were a handful of other women throughout the state who were allowed to vote. But to clear things up after that craziness, the territorial legislature soon mandated that no female shall have the right of ballot or vote. More than a decade later, in 1883, the territorial legislature passed a bill giving women the right to vote. And in that next election in 1884, 25% of the ballots cast were by women. Sadly, the victory was short-lived. The Washington Supreme Court overturned the law in 1888 on a technicality. They cited that Congress had not intended to give the territories authority to enfranchise women. There's actually a really complicated but really fascinating story about that if anyone is interested, could check out on historylink.org. The next year, a proposal was made to add women's voting rights to the new state constitution because Washington was working on statehood. But in the end, it failed to pass because a powerful lobby at the Constitutional Convention made the case that it could hurt Washington's chances for statehood, given that the country had not made this change yet. This caused the movement to be pretty deflated, and the women's suffrage movement waned for a while. And when it resurfaced, it was very divided and rife with conflict. But early in 1909, the state legislature decided that it would put the issue to a vote of the people. And by people, they meant men, of course. Internal divisions in the movement had to be put aside, though, for the greater good of the cause. Women's suffrage supporters waged a really high-spirited campaign. They just put their hearts and souls into it, and they were able to change the minds of the male voters. Overwhelming voter support made Washington the 5th state in the United States where women could vote. What's really cool is that this also reinvigorated the national campaign for suffrage, and it is what led to the passage of the 19th Amendment. And although the 19th Amendment gave many women throughout the country the right to vote, as Cynthia alluded to earlier, not all women benefited from this. Immigrants and Native Americans faced barriers to citizenship, which prevented their ability to vote at all since they weren't considered citizens. And African American women who attempted to use their new voting rights were often blocked by intimidation and even violence. But as Councilmember Cox said earlier, there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Women today are active in all levels of government and are running for office in unprecedented numbers. And as I'm sure you're all aware, in 2020 in particular, women of color are being seen up and down the ballot, including the unprecedented choice of a woman of color as our vice presidential candidate. So that's my history there. And I just want to invite everybody, when the museum does reopen, to come and view our suffrage exhibit. We'll have one at the museum and one at City Hall. They're each a little different, but we'll tell a great story about this really important history.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was a lot of really great information, and I'm sure that Shayna will probably be getting into that even deeper in her History Talks series episode. Is that accurate to assume?
Yes, correct.
Cynthia or Carolyn, do you have any comments from that?
I just really appreciate the wealth of knowledge that Erin has shared with us, and
yeah,
I always learn something new. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate all the people who were out, including Erin, honking and waving at us yesterday. You know, when you're out standing there for a couple of hours, it really helps keep you going when people do engage. And so it was fun.
Well, good. Thank you so much. I think this brings us, make sure we don't have any questions that came in. This brings us to the end of our chat. So
Lenny, I have one last thing.
Oh, please. Yes, Erin.
I would like to invite anyone who would want to help us with our Collecting COVID History project. We are collecting photographs of anything that people have been doing during the pandemic, what really speaks to them, that would share their experience. It could be stuff they're doing with their family. It could be art projects you're undertaking or working at your essential job or whatever. Your furry co-workers, I have some that really help with the work. Anything like that, they can go to the website at laceymuseum.org, and we have a link right there on the front page that will take people to where they can submit their photos.
That's a great idea, because this is
that, but I didn't do it quite right, did I? I needed to get a JPEG or something other than the whatever I sent.
Yeah, it was embedded in an email.
Yeah.
I
will do it again.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea, though, to collect photos from this time that, I mean, years from now, this will be a historic event, and it will be great to include this sort of information in our new museum that will have plenty of space and room. So to capture people's, kids doing school at home, or, I don't know, gardens that they planted during this time, or whatever it might be. So for any of our viewers, if you're willing to participate in that, we would sure appreciate it and love to see what everybody has been up to during COVID. So
and we'll be sharing a few of those photos during History Month too.
Oh, good. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today, and for, like Carolyn said, the wealth of knowledge that you bring, Erin, and for that little history lesson that we had. We encourage you guys to, our viewers and listeners, just to, learn more and vote, and let us know here at the city if we can help answer any questions that you might have regarding anything that we talked about today. So thanks again for everybody tuning in. You can find a replay of this on our Facebook page or YouTube page. So just search that and you can find that to share or replay at any time. So Cynthia and Carolyn and Erin, thank you so much again for joining us and giving us your time today. We will see you all next time.
All righty. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Jenny.
Bye.